All right, this video is going to be a little different than what I typically do. I'm going to talk about changes that I want in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, specifically when I'm talking about birth signs. And now why I'm talking about this, maybe some modders will get some good ideas to help improve their mods, or if I'm being really lofty, maybe some developer will get some ideas and hopefully I can shove my brain into their ideas. Now they just have to accept my opinions. Now, my philosophy about balance is, well, one, things don't have to be equal. I want all birth signs to feel like something you should choose that give you some advantage. Maybe you can get them other places. In fact, that's okay because Oblivion is such a flexible and versatile game. There's so many things you can do. It would mostly be changing the early or mid game, so it gives you some advantage to make some aspect of the game easier. I also want to keep up with the lore of each birth sign and talk about those as well. So I don't want to totally change them where the lore is destroyed, but I do want to update them so they're more engaging in the gameplay. All right, we're going to start in reverse alphabetical order. So I'm going to start with the warrior today. And currently, the warrior gives 10 strength and 10 endurance. Now, I also want to talk about each birth sign is based on a month. And the video game month is called the last seed, which correlates with August. So if you're born in August, you were born under the warrior constellation. The changes that I would like to see is I think it should add 100 fatigue. And this is because due to attribute changes, warriors start with much less fatigue than they did in the classic game. Fatigue is also extremely valuable now for warriors. You need it to actually attack. When you're completely out of fatigue, you can't block or you'll get staggered when you block. You can't jump. In the classic game, all fatigue did is you did half damage when you were completely out. And so it wasn't as big of a deal, and now it's a very big deal. And I think it kind of turns it into a noob trap where you'll have a person pick a Nord, pick the strength and endurance as their favorite attributes, and pick the warrior, which is totally what I love to do. But now they're really lacking in fatigue and they'll have to have a plan to fix that. And I can show you here, if you picked a male Nord and the warrior sign with strength and endurance as your favorite attributes, in classic you'd have 200 fatigue. Now if you do the same thing but pick a western Nord, you'd only start with 133 fatigue. And as you go on, you would increase your strength and endurance to 100, and your fatigue would not go up from increasing those. Those would be your plus fives as a warrior. Chances are, if you didn't know how fatigue worked, you'd read willpower and think, oh, that's mana regen. That's magicka regeneration. I don't really need that one. I'm going to put my +2 into speed maybe. So there's a good chance you wouldn't even be gaining any fatigue for the first chunk of levels, like 7 levels as you put them into strength, endurance, and speed, thinking you're trying to be a pure warrior. And you're going to have that very low fatigue even as you gain levels. On the other hand, if you're a female Breton who picked the lady sign because you wanted the most magicka regen, your starting fatigue in the classic game would have been 65 if you picked willpower as a favorite attribute. In the remaster, this character would have 213. And one of the things they would be putting +5 into every time would be willpower. And so very quickly, that fatigue would get very high. And while they wouldn't gain any into agility, that's okay. They'd already have over 300 fatigue by the same point where this Nord warrior would only have 133. So this mage who's focused on magicka regen, and maybe they're putting points into endurance as they level up too, they're going to have way more fatigue. So if we go back to level 1, that was 65, 65, and 65. In Classic, the warrior had more fatigue, a little bit more, because all of these give 1 point of fatigue. That was the formula in Classic. It's just the sum. Now fatigue is, well, willpower gives 8/3 of fatigue per point, and agility gives 4/3 of fatigue per point. Because Nords start with such low willpower, they start with very low fatigue. Red guards of both genders also only start with 30 willpower. And I keep saying genders, but I mean origins. It's hard for me to go back and forth. The left origin always corresponds with males in Classic, and the right origin always corresponds with females in Classic. If you're curious when I'm getting these numbers, I don't have them all memorized, but if we look at the willpower column right here, there is some 30s. Dark elves also start with 30. Imperial males start with 30, which is a fun one to pick as a warrior sign. Here's Nord males, Red guards males and females. With only 40 agility, Red guards start with very low fatigue, which they need to be a successful warrior. So it's kind of frustrating. They'll rely on their adrenaline rush, greater power, to get enough fatigue, which is just not how it should be, in my opinion. Okay, next we have the Tower. The Tower is Frostfall, which is October. It's spooky, Halloween. It's one of the Thief's charges. Those born on the Tower are thought to have a knack for finding gold and opening locks. So currently the greater power is, or what it gives you is it gives you 2 greater powers. One to open an average lock, and 1 to reflect damage for 5%. If you didn't know, a greater power is something you can use once per day, and then you have to wait 24 hours, or 24 hours of in-game time has to pass before you can use it again. It doesn't cost anything. You can use these while silenced. They're not affected with any skill. So normally open is an alteration spell, and so as your alteration goes up, it costs less magicka, and as you cast open spells, it increases your alteration skill. Powers are not like that at all. Greater powers cost nothing. Lesser powers do cost something, but it's not affected by your alteration skill or your other magic skills. It doesn't improve any skill, and it's a set magicka cost, and you can use them multiple times. Some lesser powers can be used while silenced, others cannot. I would say all the ones I'm talking about should be able to be used while silenced because I think that's cool. So I think the changes should be, well, the open should just be a lesser power. That should not be restricted to once per day. I think that's a total, makes it almost worthless. Like, I'm not going to hotkey that because I can only use it once per day. So instead of opening the lock, I have to go through my menu to find my greater power to open an average lock or easier. That's just stupid. The only time that would be worth it would be for a very hard lock. The others would take less time to just pick the lock. So I think this is a terrible greater power, whereas a lesser power, it could be worthwhile. Next, we have the greater power reflect damage should be boosted to 20%. Now, it doesn't need to be for 2 minutes. That could be seen as overpowered, but 5% is just such a small amount you will never notice it. And really, people only pick this sign right here. This sign's purpose is to access reflect damage for spell making. The only other way to do it is when you rebuild the big Guardian in Shivering Isles, the big dead guy. There's a way to get to get reflect damage for spell making. I think this is all. You should not have a birth sign that's only purpose is to unlock something for spell making. This makes reflect damage, the greater power itself actually would do something. 20% still wouldn't be that noticeable, but if you combine it with a reflect damage item or a reflect damage custom spell, this could actually be worthwhile and not be a total waste. Also, opening locks, it'll be nice. You could hotkey it as a lesser power, and just, if you hate the lockpicking minigame, because this is a lesser power, you could actually just use this, and you wouldn't require alteration either. You wouldn't need to get your alteration up to be able to use that. It'd just be a free lesser power that you could do with. So people who really hate picking locks could pick this, and people who are really interested in reflect damage could pick it. It actually has some purpose. Next, we have the Thief or the Hunter. Now, this is for people born in Evening Star. So if you were born in December, you were born under the Thief. It's one of the 3 Guardian constellations. That's the Warrior, the Thief, and the Mage. Those are the 3 main ones. Now, currently in the game, they get 10 agility, 10 speed, and 10 luck. And I think that's pretty weak. I think the agility should be bumped up to 15 because overall, I think attributes are weak. And any sign that's just attributes should get a little bit of a buff because early game, they're going to feel pretty nice. But the fact is, I say it right here. A character who cares about agility, if you're a wood elf who starts with 50, you pick the thief sign, so you start with 60, you pick it as a favorite attribute. After 7 levels, you get it to 100, and now all you're really getting is you're getting other attributes up faster, where someone who didn't pick the thief might have to put points into agility for 2 more levels, and they wouldn't be putting points into, I don't know, strength or willpower or those other secondary attributes. So even though these are nice, it's really not that great. So I think boosting up the agility by 5 would be nice. Luck is not very powerful in this game. I wouldn't boost it more than 10 though, because it is 40 virtue points. And I think that's just so many. We don't really need to boost that up anymore. The really fun, unique part is taking 75% less fall damage. The Master Acrobatics perk makes you take half fall damage. And as you gain acrobatics skill, you just naturally take less fall damage. So with this, you would take 1/8 fall damage with the Master Acrobatics perk, and because you have high acrobatics, you'd essentially be invulnerable to fall damage, which I think would be very fun. It's just a new thing to do. If you are born under the Thief sign, maybe during the Thieves Guild, I don't need to wear the Boots of Spring-Heeled Jack. I can just jump down and not wear them and survive. And early game, if you've noticed in the remaster, you take way more fall damage, and it's actually kind of annoying. And this would be a way to, some players would be able to avoid that because they picked this sign. In fact, it would be, chances are, mostly those archers who are jumping around a lot and jumping off of rocks, and this would help protect them. And if someone tried to follow them, maybe they would die. So it's definitely adds to the Thief vibe. It's not overpowered, though. I don't think it's totally game-changing, but it adds something unique and fun. Okay, next we have the Steed. So the Steed is mid-year. This is if you're born in June. You're a horse, basically. Those born under the sign of the Steed are thought to be impatient and always hurrying. You're just in a rush. In Skyrim, it increased your carry weight, and it removed the penalty for wearing armor. So armor didn't slow you down. And that's actually what Feather does. Feather increases your carry weight and removes your worn weight variable. So this means it removes the penalty from your armor. So right now, it just gives 20 speed attribute. And that, I think, could stay or go. It doesn't really matter. I think attributes just don't feel that good. 20 is not enough to make a big difference. So here I have the formula that goes into calculating your final run speed. Now, I think sprint, I've never actually calculated it. I don't know how. But if I said sprint speed, I would say it's probably this times 1.15. It's about a 15% increase. I can't really tell though. So sprint, this is just me guessing, my guess. And then maybe we could make this a guess color. Obviously, if it's this pink color, it's a guess. So if your base speed is 40, let's say our athletics is 30. It doesn't really matter. Your speed affects your base walk. Your athletics is a multiplier that makes you run faster. Not sprint, but just run if you're not like RP walking, basically. Your worn weight, this is just your equipment. So your weapon, plus your armor, plus your jewelry. Now, your jewelry doesn't weigh much, but it does weigh something. With no feather, let's say I pick the Steed sign right now. It's 20 speed. I would go up from 350 to 376. So that was about 26 speed. Instead, though, really what happens is, let's say even if I'm wearing light armor, if you're wearing heavy armor, it's going to make a big difference. These are the weights of full sets of heavy armor. Daedric weighs 162. But let's say I'm wearing Elven and I'm using a glass bow that weighs 20. This is the range. This is the worst bow in the game, weighs 8. Daedric bows weigh 22, but we'll say 20. We're wearing good equipment. We're going to have 55 worn weight from that. So I'm going to add 55 to my worn weight. Now look at my final speed. It's going to go down to 298 because this encumbrance is a multiplier that slows me down. It goes up to 150. It stops changing after 150. So the most it can slow you down is down 40%. You can move at 60% of your base movement speed. But we said 55. That's what we're wearing right now. We're moving at 85% speed. Simply feathering that away, if I had 55 feather, that is an increase of more than 50 movement speed. So just the feather is a better movement speed increase than the 20 speed. So feather is better than speed for moving fast, even in light armor with a bow. Now, at 75 skill for light armor, it doesn't weigh anything. And so then it would just be a bow. But if I had a Daedric bow, that's 22 worn weight. That's still going from, we're at 349 to 329. That's still 20 movement speed. And that's after, if you're wearing light armor that weighs nothing, after you've gotten it to 75, which doesn't happen very quickly. That's very late game. And if you're wearing heavy armor, that perk doesn't happen until master skill, 100 heavy armor skill. So your worn weight variable could very easily be 150, and it's a massive difference. Even at 100 speed and 100 athletics, you're just not moving that fast if you're decked out in heavy armor and you're not using any feather to get it to go away, because this would be 520, but at max carry capacity, at max worn weight variable, I'm only moving at 312. So it's a big difference. I highly recommend using feather in this game. And I think the Steed sign should just come with 100 feather. I don't think that's overpowered. I think combined, that's a very reasonable birth sign. I might pick this over something like the Mage sometimes, or a Warrior. Still probably not, though. It's still not that competitive. And unless you're just doing it because you like the carry weight, it's not really that great. I think it should also give you a greater power of just 20 speed, 20 athletics for 2 minutes, because that's also what the birth stone does. And combine those two stones, those greater powers together. So this greater power, the birth stone greater power, the Jones stone greater power, if you use all of them and then mix in some custom spells, you could just go so fast. And I think that would be really fun. So I think that's a buff that the Steed stone should get. Also, horses can carry a lot, so why not get some feather? Next, we have Shadow. This is second seed, the month of May. Shadow, it's pretty rough. All it does currently is it gives you a greater power that gives you invisibility for 60 seconds. Now, if you don't know what the Jones stone is, I've made videos about it. You need Renown of 10, which is a combination of Fame and Infamy to buff your Renown to 10, and then you can go pick up the Jones stone. You just talk to it at nighttime, and it gives you a greater power. Let me show you exactly what it does. So magical stones. The Jones stone is right here. Invisibility, Fortify Sneak 30, Fortify Acrobatics 30, Fortify Athletics 30 for 2 minutes that you can use once a day. That's just, everybody gets this. Every single character in the game, as soon as you get 10 Renown, which is very early game, can get that. Super powerful. Completely outclasses this full birth sign. There is no magical stone that's better than just a passive 50 magicka from the Mage sign. There's no magical stone that even comes close to competing with the Lord sign. 15% shield and 15% magic resist. This is a greater power. These are all greater powers. That means you can use them once a day. So once a day, sure, if you have the Ethereal Stone, you can fortify magic and resist magic, which is great It's very useful, but it's once a day. It's not something you're using all the time. And even if you are able to wait, you often don't want to wait 24 hours just to use a greater power again. This invisibility unlocks invisibility for custom spells. Normally, you need 50 illusion to buy the cheapest invisibility spell to unlock it. The Jonestone, however, already does that for you. That's not a very big advantage of the Shadow. I think really this invisibility needs to be a lesser power, just to make it so you don't need any illusion skill. Doesn't matter what your illusion skill is. You can go invisible for 40 magicka. You picked the Shadow. This should be a big advantage for you in terms of if you want to go invisible, this should just let you do it all the time. 40 magicka, 15 seconds, because this takes not that much illusion skill. Invisibility already has a base cost of 40. That means at 33 illusion skill, it costs 4 magicka per second. So 10 seconds costs at 33 illusion skill costs 40 magicka. So this is a little bit cheaper than the base cost. If you have 100 illusion skill, it costs 1/5 of that. It would cost 8 magicka for 10 seconds. It'd be dirt cheap. 80 seconds would cost about 40 magicka. There's a spell tome that gives you 5 seconds of invisibility. That's just dropped. It's 100 times better than this birth sign. That's stupid. It shouldn't be this bad. If you're picking a birth sign just to go invisible, it should just give you that ability so you don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have the advantage of just always having 100 carry weight or just having higher attributes. Whatever. Moving on. The Serpent. This one's got some cool lore. It moves around the night sky, and so it's actually, because it wanders across the sky, you could be born at any time. They call it a constellation of 4 unstars. We could read about them if you want, but unstars, also known as not stars, are celestial objects that resemble stars and they emit light. The Serpent is made of 4 unstars, whatever that means. So this one's got the coolest lore. The charges, the Thief, Warrior, and Mage supposedly protect all the other constellations from this Serpent. So currently, it gives you 1 greater power, and it's complete trash. It causes a dot on your enemy on touch, 3 points for 20 seconds. It cures poison and dispels on you, 90 points dispel, which is up to 450 magicka, which is a lot. It will dispel most things on you, but that includes positive things. Like if you've cast shield or feather or whatever, fortify something on yourself, it will dispel that too. And it takes 100 of your fatigue. So that's something you can cast once a day to hurt your fatigue a bunch, to cure poison and do a small weak dot, damage over time effect on your enemy. It's just trash. I would never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, pick the Serpent. Now, as a greater power, sure, you can dispel yourself while silenced. Maybe you think there's some purpose to that, but there's not. You're wrong. Sorry. Changes. One, I think reading its lore, it says that it is weak against itself. It hurts itself. It bites itself. I want it to buff something like poisons and give you a weakness to poison. And so I think if this was possible, I don't think a modder could really do this, but if they could, I think poison should apply twice when used with melee weapons. So you wouldn't have to use a poison every single swing. You could put the poison on, attack, it would apply the poison, and then the next attack wave would just still be on there. I think they did that in Skyrim with a perk. This should be just come from the Serpent Stone. But that should also come with a weakness to poison, 50% weakness. I think that's really cool because you are weak to poison, but you do better with poison. If somehow you could make it so you could poison your fists, like you do a snake bite with your fists and it poisons them, super cool too. Maybe not possible, whatever. I think you should be able to poison your fist because you're a serpent. Clearly you're like, I don't know, maybe you're biting them with your teeth. Who knows? You could change the greater power to be a lesser power because almost all of them should be lesser powers because it still sucks. It damages your fatigue 100. So it'll cost 20 magicka, damage your fatigue 100 to do a small damage over time effect. And I think if you think that's too overpowered, which I don't think it is, you could make it when you use it, this 50% weakness to poison goes up to 100% weakness to poison because it's making you really weak to poison. But it cures poison, so that's kind of the point. It makes you weak to poison, but it cures poison. There's just a lot of interesting thing. And, I wrote this right here. I think it's a very interesting greater power because greater powers can't be dispelled. That you can use them while silenced. And so that damage over time can't be dispelled. Weird things like this should exist in the game, but it's just because it's by itself on a birth sign, that's all it gets. If you want to play around with this to check it out and see what niche use you can find from it, you're totally wasting a birth sign. There's no purpose to ever pick this. It's just complete garbage. But now, if you had a poison boost like this, where your poisons were twice as effective, or you could apply them twice, suddenly this could be appealing to certain types of builds, and maybe you would pick it, and then that type of player could play around with this power as a lesser power and see, okay, I can spend all my fatigue to do something. Maybe there's actually some value in spending my fatigue to dispel that silence on me, or to dispel that burden that I'm getting hit with. Next, we got the ritual. The ritual is the morning star. If you were born in January, you were born under the ritual. Currently, it gives you a greater or a lesser power, which means you can cast it repeatedly for 40 magicka to turn undead level 25 on target. Now, level 25 is the max level for these types of illusion spells, and that means you can turn any undead at any time, any point in the game on target. This is a target spell. I didn't type. Oh, I did type that for 30 seconds for just 40 magicka. So you can completely negate pretty much all undead. Problem is, that's just one type of enemy. I don't think that's that interesting, but it is good. And it has a greater power once per day. You can have an oh crap button, heal yourself 200. I think that's kind of a good niche for greater powers. They shouldn't be something you want to use every fight, but if you're about to die, oh, quick, use it. Save me. That's a good niche to have a greater power, where then you can't just spam it as a lesser power. That's the role that greater power should fill. Changes, I think honestly the ritual is already good. I think it just needs some buff somewhere. And so my theory, my thought process was just add some shock resist onto it. The ritual, according to lore, is really connected to the Mages Guild, but it's also very connected to anti-undead like clerics and paladins because of that turn undead power, because of that healing power. If you pick the birth stone, you can heal heal your on target and heal yourself. There's a lot of healing. It's connected to Mara. I think all that healing should have something defensive about it, and shock resistance is just so rare in the game. In fact, it's not available for spellmaking anywhere. This would just be one choice if you wanted to get some shock resist. I think it makes the sign, just brings it up a little bit to speed where, ooh, maybe I want to actually pick that. It would still be weak, but it would make it more competitive, so maybe you could play around with that turn undead and see if you like it. So the lore is all over the place. Because it's that Arbic eye, this is like the Mages Guild symbol for all the games. And it's also connected to like anti-undead stuff and healing. So paladins love it and mages love it. I think lightning, I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass for the lore stuff. But it's really cool. It's got a lot of different lore things. The mage, Rain's Hand, that's the month of April. If you were born in April, you were born under the mage. It currently just gives you 50 magic with no downsides. That is kind of boring, but I think it's good to have just a powerful, boring sign like that. If you just want no downsides, you want nothing weird, I just want 50 more magicka, I think it's already powerful enough. People would still pick this, especially if you didn't want any downsides and you just wanted to be a mage. Plenty powerful. The Birthstone, however, is a greater power to fortify your magicka 50 for 2 minutes. I think that's kind of annoying. It's not that great to just have more magicka for 2 minutes and then it goes away. So instead, I think it should be an instant once a day greater power to restore 200 magicka as the Birthstone that you find out in the world. So that would be a good update for that Birthstone. It would make it feel like I should go get it as a mage in case I want to save. Once a day, I can save potions. I can save Welkin Stones and just restore a bunch of magicka. I was hoping to add something about, those born under the mage are thought to be arrogant and absent-minded, but I couldn't really think of something because it is the one magic burst sign without any downsides. If you could think of something cool to punish arrogant and absent-minded mages, put it in the comments. The Lover. The Lover is a constellation of 12 stars that's in the sky in Sun's Dawn. So Sun's Dawn is February. And the current thing it does, it's kind of a total gimmick. It's hilarious. You get a greater power. So once a day, you can touch someone and damage fatigue 120 on self. Now, in classic Oblivion, if you went negative fatigue, you fell over. So if I did this with 0 fatigue, I would fall over for 12 seconds. And I would paralyze someone for 10 seconds. And you just lay there next to them because, you're their lover. Get it? Haha. Oh, okay. But that's the gimmick. And it's only once a day. So it's kind of cool to open Paralyze for spell making, and it's such a long duration, but it's dumb. It's just, it's silly. I don't think a birth sign should just be silly. I think they should be good. And greater powers, if you did pick it and you actually wanted to use it, you would be so tempted to just sit there and wait 24 hours a day over and over again, which is not fun gameplay. I don't think greater powers that are designed that way are bad. You don't want to do that. Instead, I think it should be a lesser power, where you paralyze for a short amount of time, like 3 seconds on touch, you still damage your own fatigue. So it's still something you can't spam or you will fall down, and it should cost a little bit of magicka, like 30. This would open up Paralyze for spell making. Those of you that know about birthstones already know that, if we go to our magical stones, the Serpent stone has Paralyzed 5 seconds on target as a greater power and puts a dot on them. So that's already way more powerful than the Lover. And it's just a birthstone that you can get. However, you could have both. You could paralyze them with this and paralyze them with the Serpent Stone. I think the other thing they should add to it is 100% resist paralysis. That's not really in the game very much. There's one ring that gives you 100% resist poison, disease, and paralysis. After level 20, you can find it. But this would be for people who really hate those spiderlings. Or, the Dremora sometimes have paralyze on their weapons. And so that resist paralysis could just be, I don't want to deal with the spiderlings ever. I don't want to have to get a piece of gear to do it. I'm just immune to that. And so it's not super powerful still, but I think that would make it a lot less worthless. Paralyze for 3 seconds on touch, it does actually cost a good amount of magicka, but with the damage of fatigue 100 points, if it was somehow programmable where it actually, instead of being damage fatigue 100 points, it kind of cost 100 fatigue, I think that would be cool too. Because then if you have less than 100 fatigue, you couldn't cast it again. And for balance purposes, it'd be very reasonable to say this should only be 2 seconds, or maybe it needs to cost 120 again. The specifics to this, it could be argued, because you can cast it more than once now as a lesser power, and you can cast it while silenced. It's not affected by spell effectiveness. So normally if you're wearing any armor and you do paralyze for 2 seconds, even at 95%, it's going to paralyze for 1 second. Where this as a power will actually paralyze for the full 2 seconds. I think this is probably more reasonable, more balanced. Still not that crazy though. The Lord, this is first seed. If you're born in March, you are a Lord. It's one of the warrior's charges. Now you're thought to be stronger and healthier, but they are sometimes referred to as trollkin due to their innate weakness to fire, and they don't have a weakness to fire anymore. They got rid of that, and so I think the change should be, because of that lore, that they're like, you're related to a troll, you're basically like ugly and stupid, you are related to a troll, you're a trollkin. I think that fire weakness should come back, because this is still crazy powerful. 15 shield and 15 magic resist is awesome. So I think that 25% fire weakness should just come back. Problem is, if you're making a mod, you can't really just make something weaker in a mod like this, because if someone was watching this and making a mod based on these things, don't add this in, because you'd feel really stupid to download a mod and then pick the Lord sign that's weaker than the classic game when all the other ones are buffed. It should just feel like an idiot. But, when the devs were making this, when they made the best sign in the game by a pretty significant margin, they should have left the weakness in. That's my point, because it's a give and take. Give and take signs are a great thing. A Dunmer could pick this too. They don't even really care about the fire weakness because they already have 75% resistance. But whatever. I think that's more to keep it with the lore and for balance purposes. The Lady. It's in the sky during Hearthfire, which is September. Those born under the Lady are thought to be kind and tolerant and personable. So they got to be charming. What does that mean? Well, I think attributes suck. So we're going to bump them up to 15. That would make this actually a very powerful birth sign. One of the better ones. Keep in mind, though, late game, getting a bunch of attributes is worthless. So early game, this would be very powerful. It'd be a great choice for a lot of different builds because willpower and endurance are so useful. But late game, it's bad. Once a day, I think you should be able to use Calm, level 25. And I think that the Birth Stone should give you Frenzy. So you have Calm on touch and Frenzy on touch as the Lady. I think that just adds a kind of like a feminine Calm and a feminine Frenzy. I think it's... To me, it's cool. Maybe you're a sexist asshole, but I think it's fun. My reasoning is attributes are just alone are too boring, so they got to be really big if they're in there. That's how you spell personality, by the way. 15 personality isn't great, but it gives a small bump for those role players too. I don't think it's a bad thing to just throw it in, because why not? You might be thinking 45 attributes is too much. I disagree. I just don't think it is. I think this is a very balanced birth sign compared to what the other ones offer. I would still pick the Mage over this every single time. No contest. Atronach. That's Sun's Dusk. People love the Atronach. This is known as the Golem or the War Machine. My build was called the Golem because it's based on the Atronach. Those born under the Atronach are thought to be sorcerers with deep reserves of magicka, but they can't create their own. So that's why it's got 150 magicka. That's a deep reserve. But stunted magicka, you can't create your own. And to compensate, they give you 50% spell absorption, which means you have a 50% chance when hit by a spell to just absorb the base cost of that spell. And a lot of people know about telekinesis and stuff. I don't think this one really needs changes because it's already a game changer. If other burst signs were buffed too much, I think it could reasonably go up to 200 magicka, because realistically, if you're not duping and you're not using a telekinesis thing and you're not doing any of that, it's still really powerful. It's still really good. And you can't buff the spell absorption more. That'd just be too OP. But really, you should feel like you have just a boatload of magicka. I think that's the feeling it should give you. It's just when you're out, and you need to do something about it. And that's how I think the Atronach should feel. That's just my thoughts on it. So I think this could very reasonably go up to 200 magicka if that was going to be changed. Especially if you, let's say you're making a mod and you're doing these other buffed birth signs. Like this is 45 attributes. Yeah, this could be 200 magicka. The Apprentice. So the Apprentice if you're born under the month of Sun's height, which is July. Currently, it's 100 magicka for 100% weakness to magic, which is basically minus 100% resistance. So if you pick a Breton and you have 50% resistance, you'll end up with negative 50% resistance or 50% weakness. So you don't ever pick a Breton Apprentice right now because that'd be a terrible idea. You have an affinity for magic, but also a vulnerability to magic. The change? Well, I think this is a massive downside. 100% weakness to magic is very difficult to play against. And currently, I love picking this birth sign, but I think of it as a challenge mode. I suggest, oh, hey, if you're playing Adept, pick the Apprentice because that can make Adept feel difficult, feel dangerous. And that's stupid. And that's stupid because no birth sign should just be objectively bad. It shouldn't be a bad choice. It shouldn't be a challenge run because I picked this birth sign. Now, I think the weakness should stay because it's really cool. It's a lot of fun, but the benefit should be massive. I think it should obviously be 200 magicka, and that allows you to just have an insane build, an absurd amount of magicka, and it opens up new builds that are looking to go spell reflect, spell absorb, or maybe resistance builds like resisting fire, frost, and shock instead of just resist magic. You don't have to go Breton, Lord, get mundane ring, I'm immune to magic. Maybe you pick the Apprentice as a high elf, you have a boatload of magicka, or an Apprentice as a, doesn't matter, an Argonian, and then you try and get that fire, frost, and resist up in other ways. I also think the burst stone, this one is a greater power. Right now, the greater power is really lame. It's fortify illusion and alchemy 20 points. The alchemy doesn't work, so it doesn't do anything. So you fortify the illusion skill by 20 points for 20 seconds, which, oof, not good. So I think that should be changed to give you resistances. Fire and frost by 10%, and you know how I feel about shock damage. I think that should be the highest. The numbers there aren't too specific, but for balancing purposes, the Lord gives 50% frost resist and a tiny bit of armor. So they should add up to about 50% to be comparable to the Lord as the Apprentice. Again, this is also another way that resist shock could be available to all characters for spell making or enchanting, which I think is cool. It shouldn't be not in the game. I might in the future make a version of this for race changes. A quick rundown of what I'm thinking is giving like Argonians 50 magicka, increasing the bonus to magicka for Altmer, but increasing the weakness. Dunmer could get magicka and fatigue. Red Guards could get a bunch of fatigue. Nords could get a shield. Bosmer's command creature greater power has to be level 25 or it's stupid. Orc Berserk just needs a rework. It should give the Orc himself, the player, weakness to normal weapons, like 100%, meaning you're taking double damage from all physical damage. Because people don't really know what weakness to normal weapon does. Weakness to normal weapons just means weakness to physical damage in the game. That includes bows, that includes daggers, that includes Daedric daggers, that includes enchanted axes, everything. So Berserk should make you take double physical damage, and it should apply 50% weakness to normal weapon on hit for, I don't know, 10 seconds or whatever. So it's another way to get more weakness. So you're taking more damage, but you're dealing more damage. And I think that should be a lesser power. Maybe 50 magicka for 60 seconds. So it actually takes a chunk of your magicka because you're an orc who's relying on Berserk. That's kind of how you have to spend your magicka if you want to use Berserk. And it should still drain all your agility, so you're not regenerating fatigue as fast. Khajiit, I think, should have half fall damage because they're cats. And with the Thief sign, they should have no fall damage at all whatsoever in the game. So if you pick Khajiit Thief, you could do one of those rocket up into the sky, into space, and fall and be totally fine. I think that'd be awesome to have stuff like that in the game. It's not enough. Khajiit need a little bit more, so why not? We could throw in Shock Resist or something. I don't know. I haven't fully thought that through yet. Like I said, I might do a future video where I add a little bit more to the race changes. And Imperials should get a little health bonus and make their charm a lesser power. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you like this type of video where I talk about things that I would like different in Oblivion, or if you'd prefer if I just go back to always talking about the way things actually are in the game and not just what I'm hoping for them to be. All right, thanks for watching.